Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
This is probably one of the first, I shouldn't say first. We haven't done an episode like this so close to release in probably
Since
quite a
we
while.
started.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when we were going through and looking at our schedule, it made sense. Jason, you brought it up. It made sense to record this, even though it's going to be dropping tomorrow.
Yeah.
Record this because we've both been very busy for the past 2 weeks almost. And the book of Boba Fett came out.
Yes, it did.
And obviously after the success of The Mandalorian, what people call the Mandoverse, it's worth having, and since we've talked about Star Trek so much, changing gears.
Yep.
And since we are playing, although we haven't in a while, played some Star Wars role playing, Edge of the Empire. So it just seemed logical to have an episode talking about the book of Boba Fett.
Our early impressions.
Yes.
So we've been saving this just to put this in perspective for everyone. I know you and I have talked about this in the past in episodes, but we typically record 3 to 4 weeks ahead of a release date to have a healthy buffer.
Yep.
Especially, in retrospect with stuff in both of our lives that's been going on the past couple of weeks, things have been busy, but we really, really want to get first impressions out to everybody. Where as we record, it is the night before we release this episode, like you said, and it's only days after the first episode dropped about the book of Boba Fett.
Yep. So yeah, I think we both now, when we've talked a bit over the past 2 weeks, but we've had a lot of stuff going on. Nothing deadly
all good
or
now.
Anything. All good. But we haven't had a lot of time to chat. No. So we have not talked about this before recording this.
This is even more unscripted than normal.
Yes. So what you're going to hear is organic to another level.
Yep.
Because we haven't even asked each other's opinion of the show.
No, we at all, actually.
So that being said, what's your opinion?
Oh boy, put me on the spot.
That's maybe a broad question. Let me try this. What was your initial?
No, it's I mean, it's a totally fair question, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here recording right now as we are. So I liked it. I'm going to qualify some of my answers, but I'm going to, which maybe isn't fair, but I'm going to start by saying I enjoyed it. I didn't want the first episode to end. It finally started explaining things. Okay, so let me just pause here. Spoiler alert. Big spoiler alert. We are going to assume, if you're listening, you've seen it. We're not going to share too much, but there are going to be spoilers because there's no way to meaningfully talk about it and talk about its application to role play. Okay, so that said, I enjoyed it. At the end of the episode, because we've both seen it twice, I believe. At the end of the episode, it was just starting to settle in, and I wanted to see more. I have a number of questions. Now, it did not wow me like the first episode of The Mandalorian. First episode of The Mandalorian, I was totally hooked. Right. In fact, my wife and my 2 girls and I were hooked. We were in. This one, my girls both said to me, it's okay. It's kind of slow and dark. And I think both of those things are true observations about the episode, but I liked it, and I loved the soundtrack. Same composer, right? As Mandalorian. Love the soundtrack. It's very, very interesting. I'm going to stop there, Brad, because there are a whole bunch of things I want us to talk about in terms of role playing. More importantly, what did you think of it? Your initial impressions?
I have the exact opposite in terms of between Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. One, I was the kid in the 70s where my mom saved up the Kenner proof of purchase labels,
Yeah.
and you had to mail those in to
Old
get
school.
a Boba Fett action figure. They weren't
wow.
being sold at the time. And this was back in the day where there weren't any, there weren't any joints at the elbows or at the knees.
Right.
So everyone walked or moved their arms in
Yeah.
full. Mine actually had the shooting missile before they stopped that. So
We'll
I've
put your
always
eye out.
been a humongous fan
Yeah.
of him. Obviously, you and I know since Jedi came out in 82, 83, there's been decades of questions about what happened to him. The Mandalorian helps solve them in some ways. But for me, when I watched The Mandalorian first episode, I'm like, okay, we got some new Star Wars. It's not in a film. Okay, I'll get into it. I finally got into it a little more at the end. My son watched it and said, my friends say it's kind of boring. As soon as they showed him in the Sarlacc pit and him trying to fight his way out, and sorry, spoiler.
Yeah, we're back to Boba Fett now, the new show.
Yeah, the Boba Fett. As soon as Boba Fett, they were showing that, I was hooked.
Yes.
And so, seeing him pop himself out of the sand after surviving and finding his way out, to me, I was sold. Now, that being said, much more of a cerebral episode. Obviously, it's a setup. They were setting up relationships with other characters, seen and unseen. The way they did the flashbacks where he would, you'd see current moment and then you'd see flashback to prior to current, probably, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, prior to the Mandalorian.
Well, immediately after Jedi.
Yeah. So, to me, I'm ready for another episode.
Big time.
I was ready for another episode right after I finished the first one.
Yes.
I needed to give it, the one thing we did talk about was we were going to watch it multiple times.
Yep.
I needed to give it a couple days to do it because I didn't want to get the same impressions twice.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
But I wanted to have one really fresh view and one another relatively fresh view. So I had a different, I was a little more lukewarm to Mandalorian than I was to Fett.
Interesting.
But I've always had an affinity for him as a character. And I even when Lucas redid the trilogy for the 54th time and they changed the voices of Boba Fett in Empire Strikes Back to Tamara Morrison's voice. And then when they redid Jedi and they added more material for him, to me, the more Fett, the better.
I agree with that. So just to put some stuff out here for discussion, this is what's been on my mind the past. Well, what I watched it the second time just yesterday. So this is a couple things been on my mind. So both in terms of just thinking about the show and thinking about the show as another entry point or source book, if you will, say it there, Book of Boba Fett, as a source book, if you will, for role playing. Okay, so the Mandalorian occurs about 5 years after Jedi, right? Yep. Okay, so this is happening so the Book of Boba Fett happens very shortly after the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Yep.
So we're 5 to 6 years after Jedi. Now, Morrison is 61?
Yep.
But, so here's a little discrepancy, but that would mean that at the height of his bounty hunting, when he worked for Vader, he was still like 56, 55. I don't think so. I'm willing to give it to them. Yeah.
Well, it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You don't know what sort of Geritol they might have been giving or had. We don't know aging. So jokes aside, that was something where I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, could a 55-year-old bounty hunter be like number one to Jabba and number one to
It's
Later.
just not gonna happen. But that's, I mean, I'm willing to give that to them for the sake of continuity of not messing around with the reality is Morrison, who I'm enjoying in the role. He's too old for the character, but I'm willing to look the other way on that. I just really want to just verbalize that, check out my logic with this. I'm biting my tongue. There are a number of pieces in terms of role-playing potential that I'm rather excited about. But I don't know.
Don't bite your tongue. Yeah, no, I think we are.
Okay. So I guess we are, because we don't know anything. I know what the other thing is. I have one more qualm. In The Mandalorian, we see that the sand people of Tatooine are largely sign-based in terms of language. And we see in Boba Fett, the book of Boba Fett, that they are not. So unless that's a local dialect issue, and it might be because their attire is clearly different.
Yes.
This looked like a tribe that was different. And whereas in Mandalorian, it implies that these are the sand people on the prowl in the wastes, maybe closer to Mos Eisley, whereas Mos Espa is a good third of the planet around. Yep. And that's where, so I'm willing to indulge of maybe it's not an oversight, since they don't tend to have oversights with these shows anymore, not like that. If they put that much effort into different tribal outfits, maybe this is showing us a diversity and humanity of sand people we haven't seen.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I mean, obviously the younger juvenile that had taken Fett, who had taken Fett and the Rodian, thank you, with him, he knew full well it seemed like he knew full well that Fett and the Rodian did not know his language. Mm-hmm. So, but he was still verbalizing, right. But he was also, prodding and using things like that. So it almost, to me, when I saw it in A New Hope, when I saw it in Mandalorian, and we obviously know from Mandalorian more detail, when I saw it, especially here in Triple B or Double BF, that sounds bad. Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that. I still felt like it was a non-verbalness to it, and it was more like a battle cry.
Maybe. Well, I just bring it up because I'm really curious to see how they run with this. Again, we've seen one of 7 episodes.
Yeah.
So I think we agree. We are really looking forward to the next one. I really want to see how the story unfolds. Okay, so role playing.
Can I ask you a question? Because maybe you don't. So, and I might have missed this in my watch of The Mandalorian, which means I have to I really should watch it again anyway. Toward the beginning of the movie, obviously people are coming to pay homage.
Yep. They're giving,
for lack of a better term, giving tributes. They used a term for him as, in effect, the crime lord.
Yep.
Was that term introduced in The Mandalorian, or is that something that was introduced here? I had never heard that term before, and I can't remember it off the top of my head.
That they call him in place of crime lord.
Yes.
And it's like one of the first tributaries calls him that.
Yes.
Had you asked me that earlier before we recorded, I would have done my homework. I did.
Yeah,
notice,
I know. I
did notice the term, and I haven't heard it before, so I don't know if that's in Huttese or something else.
Okay, that's what I thought. And again, like you said, I probably should have done my homework beforehand, but we made this very organic. I don't remember, but it was an interesting term. And then the question becomes, obviously, Tatooine was controlled by the Hutts. Is he controlling most, if not all, as the overlord of the planet?
That's a really good question. We don't know.
No.
So these are the kinds of questions that, like, as he and Fennec Shand are walking across Mos Espa, he says, I think it's at the end of the episode or toward it, that sorry, I'm having a moment, that Jabba had many, many vassals. And so they're going to need to reach out to them to maintain the crime empire. We don't know. That's okay. So let's kind of switching over now into potential for role playing. That's one of the things. So, for example, this happens this occurs in Mos Espa, or near Mos Espa, not Mos Eisley. Now, we didn't really know much about those cities. I mean, I guess there was some extended universe stuff, but like legend stuff. But it wasn't until The Mandalorian when we see the holo map of Tatooine that we learned there are only 3 or 4 major outposts, and the rest of the planet is essentially desert waste. I don't know, though. I will say, I thought Mos Espa was gorgeous, was awesome as a city, and the chase sequences and whatnot through it, over it, were so realistic. And I watched that, kept thinking, okay, so listeners, forgive me, don't send us hate mail or hate tweets, although do get on Twitter with us. I want to say it's called Manhunt, but Manhunt is considered to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest ever written adventure for Star Wars RPG. It was one of the early West End adventures, and it came with a fold-out map of I believe of Mos Eisley, and it was considered exceptionally creative. And so when we see Mos Espa from the distance, right in that crater and pouring up over it, I thought, oh my God, the role-playing potential here is just immense. If you want to do the city type, almost the dungeon crawl version for Star Wars, if you want to do the city type where you are in a hive of scum and villainy, and now the powers that be are shifting, right? Like he said, like Boba Fett said, I have replaced Bib Fortuna, right? Who, of course, replaced Jabba the Hutt, courtesy of Luke and entourage. I just thought the potential there for role playing is huge. And so whereas with The Mandalorian, there's all of this story and lore and new worlds to consider for role playing, with the Book of Boba Fett, the first episode offers us this panoply of opportunity in a single city on a single famous to us planet. And I just thought, oh man, like it made me, and even talking about it now, it makes me want to GM, because it's like, oh, we could just develop the coolest adventures in a city like that.
It's like, I think you used the term, it's like a dungeon crawl, but it's a city crawl.
Yeah.
So again, more of a rhetorical question. You introduced us into our adventure being on the edge of Hutt space.
I did.
Right?
Yes.
Not Hutt planet.
No, our edge of Hutt space, what I called the rim for you and Brian, our hybrid.
So the Hutts controlled more than one planet.
The Hutts controlled, right, a huge swath of the galaxy, and were so powerful that even the Empire didn't try to fight them, but negotiated.
So obviously, between the death of Jabba in episode 6, and when Boba goes in and kills Bib Fortuna, the Hutts, for whatever reason, did not go in and supplant Fortuna with another Hutt to control Tatooine. Either they were busy, or they gave am I missing something, or their tacit approval?
Because that's the thing, like, we don't know the timeline.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And why? I mean, each part of Hutt space is essentially ruled by a family. So I never thought of that, Brad. Why wasn't Bib Fortuna kicked out? Why wasn't he replaced? So I don't know. Maybe we're going to see a Hutt.
And remember now, we saw either Jabba's a relative of Jabba, whether a spouse or other, in the Phantom Menace at the beginning of the pod race.
Yeah.
So
I think on that note, another thing that stood out to me, very subtle. I don't know how intentional it is, but I think it has it has cachet for role playing, is listening to the dialogue. It reminds us that the galaxy a long time ago, far, far away, as you said, is still pretty darn racist, right? Like one thing that was really cool was to see a Trandoshan. That was cool.
Yep.
However, it's kind of no different than like calling Din Djarin, no different than calling him Mando. That's a racial slur, essentially. And so whether it's intentional or not, I think we are getting all these excellent backdrop reminders for role playing.
I think I can understand now that we've had the Mandalorian and we're being teased with the Book of Boba Fett. Why playing on the air quote edge of the Empire is appealing. It's one of the things I always struggled with role playing Star Wars, and that was the area you jumped in first, and it wasn't because Edge of the Empire was the first out. By the time you had started to get into it, the other three source books so
but it draws
and now I can see a Mos Espa crawl, a Mos Eisley crawl, a whole Tatooine crawl, dealing with scum and villainy. To me, it just felt like that. We've already talked about role-playing never interfering with canon, but on the flip side, for some reason, I felt like it just didn't resonate with me until we started playing what we had, our game, as well as me starting watching The Mandalorian,
because it's giving us so, like you and I talked a lot about this over multiple episodes, but it gives one so much freedom with which and in which to play, doesn't it? I mean, seeing and it's no longer just Star Wars who's doing this, although they indisputably, I think, do it the best. But in Star Wars, there's always a frontier that's not quite the right word. There's always an outer rim, right? There's always the unknown. There are always countless species and planets and cultures. And, with these shows, they are giving us so much more. Although I will say, I think there is one potential risk that, though the Mandalorian, I think, has been careful not to abuse it, but between the Mandalorian, now the Book of Boba Fett, and the up and coming Kenobi, we're going to get a lot of Tatooine.
Yeah, potentially. Well, obviously,
maybe not. Not.
We know, obviously. I mean, because a lot of what took place, the major action scenes were at Tatooine, right?
Right.
Or space.
Yeah.
But I've already, we don't have anything away. It's already clear that Hayden Christensen is coming back for Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
So Obi-Wan is not going to stay on planet the whole time.
No, and then as soon as I said that, I realized, in fact, most of that story won't be. In fact, it probably can't be on Tatooine until the very end of that series.
Yeah, and there was this whole article about it wasn't completely in the vein you talked about, but I think someone's like, okay, do we have to have another show on Tatooine? I think it was something along those lines as the title. Yeah. And someone was like, okay, well, wait a second. Remember, why would they take Luke to Tatooine? Anakin / Vader hated Tatooine.
Yeah.
It's where he was a slave. He hated the sand. He talked about that all in Attack of the Clones.
Excellent acting. Yes, go on.
And so there was virtually no chance that Vader would show up on the planet.
Right.
He showed up over the top of the planet in A New Hope, but he never stepped foot on the planet. And he never sensed, and even when he did, he never sensed Luke.
Well, and how much of that was him being shielded by Obi-Wan?
Exactly.
Right.
So Obi-Wan, I sense we're going to see more off Tatooine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We've already seen, and I know we've stepped away from Boba Fett, but we've already seen it's publicly available out on Disney Plus and YouTube and all that. Anakin and or not Anakin, Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor practicing sword fighting.
Yep.
And when they're practicing, Hayden is wearing a mask that looks similar to not a mask like we wear for health, but like a mask that looks like it would cover like Vader's, like the triangle.
Right.
So he must be having to learn to breathe and fight through those vents as part of it.
Good observation.
So but you bring up a good point. There could be, we have a lot of other planets. I mean, it would be nice to see Coruscant again.
Oh, can you imagine what they could do with it now?
Yeah.
I mean, if they can make Mos Espa look like that, and that I think is the point in terms of the applicability for role playing. Like I've been out of the loop for the past couple of weeks. It's been my winter break. We were traveling, other stuff. You've had stuff going on, and I find I'm starting to itch to play again, which is always a good sign. And the Book of Boba Fett, it makes me want to play some Star Wars, because it's like, man, look at the possibility. And I think that's what most that's excite is the wrong word, but that's what most gets me going about these shows, of beyond being just so much fun to watch, just the sheer immersive creativity and the potential for it to manifest in our games, right, in one way or another.
Well, think about this, because let me hijack here. We go to Star Trek. We can play in the original series period. We can play in the TNG DS9 Voyager period.
Yep.
We can start to try to play in the Picard period, the early 25th century.
Yep.
Or we could attempt to 930 years into the future.
Yep.
With the new Discovery era.
Yep.
Or we could even play before TOS, and we could play in the
Pike era.
The Pike era.
Or Discovery, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And not only that, you can play, that's time periods.
Yep.
You can play Klingon adventures, Federation adventures. You know, I should have put our I need to add, let me put it this way. I need to ask if we're going to see a Romulan source book, because I think that would be quite a cool source book to have for Star Trek. But
we need to reach out. Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, is we have different time eras.
Yep.
And we have different storylines. You could jump into a TNG type storyline, a DS9, jump into the Dominion War. Star Wars, we only had really one master timeline. And that was the Empire fighting the Rebellion, fighting First Order, fighting the Resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was irrelevant in the grand scheme.
Right.
Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, the group that is building out this new expanded Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah, brilliant.
Giving us independent time periods and timelines.
Right.
To fill the gaps.
Yep.
And as such, independent time periods and timelines and groups that we can role play. We couldn't have role played, even with the Edge of the Empire. I don't think we could have. We have so much more material just from one television series and an episode of another.
Yes, it's so much. It's wonderful. For the record, let it be noted that I did not bring up Star Trek first in this episode. For the record.
It was one of those things that I thought of the other night where I'm like, okay, why was Star Trek more compelling to me to look at role playing than Star Wars at first? Well, it's because there are so many different arenas in which to play Star Trek that are in effect canon developed. There really wasn't that in Star Wars. Well, and even Marvel. Even if you role played Marvel, and I don't know who does that. People probably do.
Well, Fantasy Flight Games would like you to.
Yeah. there's, you have different time periods, different groups, different areas. It opens up. Star Wars seemed to me to be very narrow.
Yeah.
Now they're fixing that.
Well, and so two thoughts on that quickly. One, I'm quite intrigued to see what continues to reveal for the High Republic era, because man, that's a totally different set of options, it seems, for playing. But also, I think I lost my train of thought. High Republic, and then
Different
something.
timelines, different periods. So High Republic gives us one. Boba Fett takes off on the Mandalorian.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So sorry, everybody. So, I think with Star Wars, because you have the original trilogy, and then you have the prequel and sequel trilogies, but well, the prequels are building up to the original trilogy, and the sequels are take two, right? Though fun to watch. So but like Lucas has said, Star Wars initially really followed Campbell's monomyth of the hero's journey, and so all of the canon was around Luke Skywalker, and we saw the galaxy through the lens of that story, of that myth. And then the prequels broadened it a bit, the sequels broadened it a bit, but not much, just more options within, more galaxy within. But then when you had the Clone Wars started to really broaden it, the Bad Batch certainly did, Rebels did a lot to broaden canon, and then the Mandalorian kind of blew it wide open, right? By starting to address the gaps from a different perspective. And now we have the book of Boba Fett, and let's be honest, the episode ended, and the second time I watched it ended, and I thought, so I don't think this is where it's going. But essentially, we have an exceedingly high production budget to catalog the frustrations of a nascent business person. and it's like, well, that's interesting, but to stop poking fun at it, because we both really enjoyed it. These shows are helping to take canon and hence role-playing material in really new directions that, to go back to what you said, Brad, that are beyond the monomyth of Luke Skywalker, and that start to look at the galaxy from lots of perspectives, which means you can play in all those perspectives. And that's where, here it is, that's where Star Trek historically has done better, although it's only in the past couple of years that they've begun to break the mold of everything through the lens of Starfleet. So, they had the same issue, just wrought a little differently.
Well, and I think, this would be an interesting topic for another day, but, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm a firm believer that it was really, Star Trek had the opportunity to do this before anyone else.
Yes.
But the problem is we didn't have streaming services. We didn't have businesses like Paramount or Disney, Apple, Disney Plus, whatever you want to call it, HBO Max, whatever, that had their own streaming services where they could produce great material and not have to worry about putting it on a big screen.
Yes.
Before streaming services, and I remember us talking about this a long time ago, when Discovery came out, and it was going to only be on Paramount. It was only going to be on CBS Plus before they changed it to Paramount.
CBS All Access.
Thank you.
They couldn't even get a good name at the time.
Yes. Yeah. And thinking to myself, well, no one's going to watch it because it's out on a streaming service. Guess what? Star Trek blazed the trail a little bit. They needed the streaming services. Who did a good job of it in building was Marvel with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
Now Star Trek can take all this material that's probably been in people's back pockets. Discovery, Picard. We've all been waiting to see what happened after Nemesis, and there's still a gap in there. We're getting information, but Picard's really filling that gap.
Yeah.
Lower Decks in funny ways. I was telling Jason that I'm binging that. Lower Decks is helping us post.
So
Nemesis.
useful. Yes.
So they're filling the gaps like Star Wars is doing. Star Trek is
Yep.
building their own cinematic universe
Yes.
with
Yes.
television shows.
Oops.
Now Star Wars is doing it.
Yeah.
And DC has been trying to with
Questionable success.
Yeah, questionable success. I think the fact that you have someone like Favreau who's lived in a very successful cinematic universe,
Yeah.
Joining the Star Wars, it will be fascinating to see what Star Wars does. And I'm going to lay this out there, topic for another day, because of stuff we saw. We'll talk about. I don't want to go back to Star Trek, but Star Trek is blazing trails. The stuff that's out now, much like the original series did in the 60s. We're going to see if, and even the cinematic universe is doing that too. The Marvel one, we're going to see how much Star Wars wants to do that. I'm fascinated at the thought of Star Wars delving into, areas of what have been tradition. I don't even know the terminology. You could probably verbalize it better than I could. Taking what are current events here and applying it into that universe and seeing how it plays out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, Luke, they didn't have an opportunity to do that. Star Trek had the stuff material, didn't have the technology to do it.
It's a different. We have talked about this before, and we'll keep talking about it. It's a different world. Everything is like today. We signed up with Apple. What do you call Apple TV? Or Apple TV Plus? Is there a difference? Tells you how new I am.
Apple TV Plus is just Apple. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we signed up. Oh, I think it's TV Plus because then it differentiates from the Apple TV, which is hardware. Okay, so we signed up because one of my daughters recently, replaced her phone, and we got 3 free months. And they want to watch. My wife and daughters want to watch Dickinson, the new show. They just discovered it, and I don't remember her name, but the protagonist is played by the actor who played Kate Bishop.
Haley Steinfeld.
Yes, Kate Bishop. And it looks good. And so I my daughter asked me this evening over supper, Daddy, is it okay if I watch when you're not there? I'm like, that's totally okay. Thanks. That's very sweet. But then I will watch Foundation. Mm-hmm. Because I've read, I've read a fair amount of Asimov. Well, few people have read a majority of Asimov, but I've read a fair amount, and I've reread the original trilogy. Love Foundation, developmentally impactful for me as a kid. That said, I haven't heard much positive about the show, certainly not through the lens of the books. But now that we have it, I'm going to watch it. And the darndest thing is at $4.99 a month.
Yeah.
I'm not overly incentivized to cancel it if there's anything on, because we still pay so much less than cable. Anyway, so to kind of validate what you're saying, Brad, it is. It's just a different world where you have all of these a la carte options. Mm-hmm. And it's more economical to do it that way than the old school cable of our childhood, right? I remember the day we got cable in our house. I was in kindergarten, and I remember telling my teacher, that we were going to get cable, right? Because I still remember using the box to turn the aerial.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, I
remember the big giant circular thing that you put the TV on to turn the TV with the antenna.
That we did not have.
my parents had the original pre-cable cable in our area here called Select TV.
Oh wow!
Which was a scrambled channel,
and
you bought the box to unscramble it,
right?
And the scrambled channel was over the air, and the box descrambled it. I did not get. And then my parents separated and divorced, but we didn't get cable until I was in 7th grade.
Oh wow!
So I couldn't imagine what it would have been like for
I was 4, so I didn't know better, right? But I grew up with HBO, not necessarily the news.
Yeah.
Which I would never let my kids watch now. But that said, that said, my point is now, as you're saying, you look at shows like the Book of Boba Fett, which are every episode film quality production. And we're seeing this. I mean, it's just it's amazing. Like my brother kind of convinced me through a talk on our trip this past week, but I told my girls, I think you're right. I think it's time in a month or two to upgrade our upstairs TV, as I said to you on texting, right? So that we're not a big TV family. We're not. We have two TVs in the house, but we're going to replace the remaining 720p with the 4K, right? With the Roku TV, because then, I mean, because now it's all there. It's like I watched a couple trailers for Dickinson this afternoon on the 720p, and it's like, that doesn't look so good.
Yeah, no, I get it. And now, like you said, it's a la carte. I mean, think about it. Discovery, The Mandalorian. Let's just use those two as an example.
Oh my God.
One, there is a limited audience, not like for limited, not like limited like our audience.
Yeah.
But limited in terms of who would watch that. Too much material to really put into film form. They couldn't make it into multiple films because I don't think it would necessarily, I personally don't think it would be compelling. And they can, Paramount or the others, Disney Plus, whatever, they can leverage the existing content they have. Yeah. And as such, the subscriptions they get to continue as a circle to build. The more people subscribe to the existing, the more people. So you look at these shows, just a couple of years ago, post Enterprise, really. Enterprise, I hate to say it, that killed the idea of Star Trek on broadcast television.
For quite some time.
I mean, obviously you never saw a whole lot of Star Wars on broadcast TV unless they were rebroadcasting the movies, or if someone hijacked the television and played the Christmas special that
I was just thinking the same thing.
Refuses to believe exists. But now because of these services, we have all this content. We've said this time and time again, but it still is fascinating to me. The streaming services, what we pay for them, yes, it is cheaper than cable, but it's still not cheap, let's be honest. But we're paying in effect into a fund that allows them to continue to produce the materials that we want to see.
That's right.
And it introduces, you can go out to CBS and watch other shows, and then all of a sudden realize, oh, okay, I'll try Discover, I'll try Lower Decks. It says Star Trek on it. I'm probably not going to be interested. I'd just be curious to see if they ever do a survey as to how many viewers.
Oh yeah,
they are first timers.
They my understanding is they do that all of the time.
And I did it with Star Trek again.
You did. And
I applied to Boba Fett.
I love it. So I think listeners, given that Brad and I are drifting so far afield, we are going to walk over to the GM corner. Let's just before we do, let's just cap the obvious. I think it's fair to say Brad and I both think that based on the first episode alone, we'll see what happens, that the Book of Boba Fett is going to offer major potential to inform and invigorate role playing in Star Wars. And my suspicion, Brad, is much like The Mandalorian did. The Book of Boba Fett is going to provide us material we haven't seen or thought about before, certainly not through differing lenses, and is just going to be really, really useful.
Yeah, I'm anxious for us to see more and to talk more about it, honestly. And I don't mean that in a cliche way. I really do mean that.
No, we'll end up talking. I think in several episodes from now, at some point we will revisit. On that note, before we drift anymore, let's walk over to the GM corner. What else? I think I know what you're gonna say because I can see you holding this stuff up on your desk. What else have you been reading, writing, watching, thinking about as it might pertain to RPGs?
So I think this is the one thing we talked very briefly about, and that is, I had a procedure, so I've been a little low key and laid up for a couple of days.
Yep.
So I've taken this as an opportunity to binge. I can walk around and all that just because of, as of the day this drops, which is tomorrow,
Yep.
COVID is flaring up pretty good
Oh man.
in a pretty harsh way. So I've been keeping close to home, but like I mentioned briefly before, I've been binging Lower Decks for the first time.
Yes.
I
time.
finished up. I'm up to date now with Star Trek. I have it on my list to rewatch The Mandalorian. Jason doesn't know the next one yet. I decided to rewatch again DS9.
Ah, yes.
So
wait, not start to finish.
yeah, from start to finish. Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I'm watching. I think I'm up
Oh my
to.
God.
I just finished episode 4. So
You're almost at the end, only
Yeah.
170 to go.
yeah. So it'll take me a while, and I can, in some cases, actually like speak the script. But for me, I thought it'd be a good winter thing.
Yes.
From a reading perspective, I've been doing a little bit of reading on, just because of the break. I did a bit of reading on Savage Worlds.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
There is a product that came out through Burning Wheel, again, my latest obsession, called Dungeon World, which is more of a dungeon crawl type of game. And it's fascinating. I can see, we've talked about this. Any game you read, you can use, whether it's a space or whatever, you can apply it to whatever, what you learn in terms to the games you're playing. Same thing I think I mentioned to you before the holidays, the end of the year transition. Same thing with watching other people DM. But the one that caught my attention, and so I've been looking through it, is a game that came out a number of years ago, had kind of a cult following in a way. They did a Kickstarter, which I was not a part of. This is a Kickstarter that occurred a while ago. But the books can be found relatively cheap on the secondhand market. So I've been looking at Torchbearer. Jason can't see this.
Oh, interesting.
The second version of Torchbearer, which
Mhm.
is another one that was published by Burning Wheel.
Interesting.
So I now have 3 of the bigger items that either are published or partnered with Burning Wheel. And so I just started to take a look at it, and then I just needed a little break from RPG stuff, and so I've been doing some other stuff with photography and all that. So that's
Nice.
mine. I know you've had a busy couple of weeks, but in the time that you've had,
Mhm.
obviously Boba Fett.
Yep.
Anything else been able to get on your desk? Or I know you've been doing some Becky Chambers stuff.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot, Brad. I trying to think here. I'm just plugging back into it now. In a few more episodes, we're going to talk about the Genesis expanded guide, and so
Yeah.
I have those dice on my desk. I had them for a while. I just actually it arrived today. I ordered it while I was still out of state. It arrived today, a day early. I just started reading this morning one of the novellas by Becky Chambers.
Okay.
And man, is she a good writer. I mean, so creative. This is outside of the Wayfarer series. This one might actually have its own applicability to role playing. And honestly, it's like I often do these days. I've had a lot of not as much lately, but I've had a lot of Star Trek on my mind. Although I'll wrap with this. 2 things have kind of been conflating. The other day I watched the documentary. Sorry, the documentary. It's Freudian slip. It's not supposed to be a documentary. I watched Don't Look Up on Netflix. Which is I like dark humor. It's really clever. It's really good social commentary. It's well acted. As someone who, astronomy was my first love, going back to like first grade. As a scientist who is all about peer review and whatnot, I really enjoyed it. I got a kick out of it. I thought the ending was there's the mid. It's actually not the episode, the ending. The mid credit scene was just hilarious. But because it's like real world, real life, it has it's gotten me thinking about for role playing. And then this is a bit loose, but I was working on the copy edit version of a paper a couple of colleagues and I have coming out that actually, believe it or not, has interplanetary in the title. And and so I've actually, just in the past couple days as we record now, I've had some more real life kind of stuff flitting around in my head, kind of mishmashing with sci-fi and RPG. So we'll see where any of that goes.
Yeah, it's been a a unique couple of weeks for us, just with lots of things going on. So we haven't been able to sit down and delve in like we have, but maybe it'll be a unique thing to see what we talk about over the next coming weeks and see if that break we had manifests itself in our episodes. We are approaching episode 46. I still think we'll get our
we're gonna hit our stride.
We're gonna hit our stride in episode 46. So if you don't know what that means, you're gonna have to catch up on movies.
And we have some surprises. We're not going to talk about them now, but we have some surprises that we'll be revealing in a few more weeks. But to close this out, perhaps, as you listen to this, if you listen to it when it drops, we are recording this on the 2nd of January, and it will drop on the 3rd of January, 2022. And we should have begun our episode this way, but maybe it's better that we're closing it.
Well, or is what I say, 2020 part 3.
2020 part 3, the 26th month. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
26th month of 2020. But seriously, happy, healthy, meaningful, safe New Year to all of you. We will see you next week.